My arch-nemesis roommate hates me. He says I always smell like milk. Just sniffing it makes him nauseous. I'm scared to death and don't dare let him know that due to a hormonal imbalance, my body can produce milk. If he found out, he'd surely call me a pervert and kick me out of the dorm. That day, I was hiding in the bathroom, secretly taking care of things. The infuriating guy, frowning in annoyance, opened the door and said, "Sneaking around in here to satisfy yourself?" It was then I realized I'd forgotten to lock the door. I looked at him in horror, only to see him staring intently at me, his gaze growing deeper and deeper. Then he suddenly stepped in, casually locking the door. Now, let's listen to the rest of the story. I've always suspected Guwai, my arch-nemesis roommate, isn't human, but a dog. I'm not insulting him, I'm just stating a fact. His nose is sharper than a dog's. The feud between Guwai and me probably started on the first day of school. Since puberty, for some unknown reason, my body has developed an unusual condition. Whenever I get too tired or my emotions fluctuate strongly, my body easily secretes a milky fluid. That day, I had just struggled to carry my luggage up to the 6th floor dorm when I noticed a wet patch on my shirt. Fortunately, no one was in the room. I quickly rushed into the bathroom to wash up and change into clean clothes. As I came out, hugging my clothes, I saw someone standing in the room. It was Guwai, a tall, upright young man with cool, pale skin and sharp, handsome features. In that moment, I, Songbai, thought a cold, arrogant school tyrant from a novel had stepped into real life. He was coolly surveying the room. Seeing me emerge from the bathroom, his eyes flickered indifferently, not lingering on me for more than a second. But then his high, straight nose twitched slightly. His gaze returned, falling precisely on me. Then he frowned subtly, a gesture almost imperceptible. Those cold brown eyes swept over me from head to toe with a scrutinizing look. Not understanding why, I immediately greeted him. "Hi, hello, I'm Songbai. Are you also in room 609? Nice to be roommates with you." Guwai didn't answer me at all. Instead, he stared at me with increasing suspicion. After a long moment, he said coldly, "I'm not happy." He drew out his words, then casually asked, "Were you breastfeeding in the bathroom just now?" I felt like I'd been struck by lightning, so angry I clenched my fists and retorted, "How can you insult people like that? I don't look like a girl at all." Since childhood, my skin barely tanned. It was even paler than a girl's, so I was often teased. Coupled with the hormonal imbalance during puberty, I felt a bit insecure and sensitive. In that moment, I felt deeply humiliated. If Guwai wasn't nearly a head taller than me, I would have punched him immediately to show him how much of a man I was. Guwai noticed my anger. He blinked, his long, curled eyelashes trembling slightly like butterfly wings, then casually apologized with a touch of innocence. "Sorry, but please don't use cow's milk for bathing in the future. You smell too much like cloying milk. It makes my nose uncomfortable." I hadn't realized Guwai's nose was so sensitive. An alarm bell rang loudly in my head. I immediately went to wash my clothes, then secretly sniffed myself carefully, no longer detecting any milky smell. Only then did I feel relieved enough to enter the room. Guwai had already neatly made his bed in cool tones. He was leaning against the wall, one leg propped up, playing on his phone. The moment I stepped into the room, his dog nose twitched slightly again. He looked up, his deep eyes silently falling on me. I immediately tensed up, afraid he'd say something earth-shattering again. Fortunately, he didn't say anything more. I lowered my head and continued unpacking my luggage, my mood a little down. Even though Guwai didn't say it, I realized it. He hated the smell on me. At the same time, I felt a bit unhappy. He was such a hypocrite. I could clearly smell the cold cedar scent on him. Why did he use so much perfume if he didn't want to make himself nauseous? Realizing Guwai's nose was too sensitive, I decided I had to be more careful, even trying to keep my distance from him. Unexpectedly, on the very first day of military training, I was assigned to stand directly in front of him. Standing at attention, I was hot and tired, sweating profusely. My body couldn't handle it and started secreting fluid nonstop. Even without turning around, I clearly heard Guwai sniff twice behind me. I was extremely nervous, not only because a large patch of my undershirt was wet, but even the guys around me seemed to smell something. They sniffed the air and surprisingly whispered curses. I think I smell faint milk. Which bastard is secretly drinking milk behind my back? Share some with me. They even used their noses to sniff around everywhere to find it. Seeing them about to reach me, I was already so tired I could barely stand. Coupled with intense mental stress, I suddenly felt my vision darken. The world spun. I only felt myself falling backward. When I came to, a surprised cry rang out. "Teacher, did someone faint?" I weakly opened my eyes. The first thing I saw was a seductive jawline. Next were thin lips pressed together unhappily. Looking up further, I saw Gu Huai's cold, beautiful eyes looking at me with impatience. It was then I realized I had fainted right onto him. He was supporting my head. I was practically lying in his arms. This close, he must have smelled it. I was so scared that I struggled to get up, but the moment I moved, my head felt even dizzier. I looked as if I had lost too much blood, but at most, I had just lost too much milk. The teacher saw my face was as white as paper and pointed to Gu Huai, saying, "Take him to the infirmary." Gu Huai's sharp, knife-like eyebrows furrowed even more. I tried to weakly refuse. The next second, Gu Huai easily pulled my arm and slung me onto his back. Gu Huai carried me towards the infirmary. Feeling his broad, strong back, I felt a bit awkward. I was also afraid that the strong smell on me would make him dislike me even more. I struggled slightly, wanting to get down and walk myself. But he thought I was about to fall and suddenly heaved me up. I unconsciously wrapped my arms around his neck, and even more embarrassingly, my chest was stimulated, and my jacket slowly became soaked. Even though my nose was filled with the increasingly strong cedar scent on him, I could still smell the milk emanating from myself. My heart was filled with anxiety. If we really went to the infirmary and the doctor examined me, my secret would be completely exposed to Gu Huai. I truly had no other choice but to whisper, "Gu Huai, can we not go to the infirmary? I want to go back to the dorm." I didn't notice that my breath was fanning against his pale, beautiful nape. His body stiffened slightly for a moment. I suspected he was angry. I unconsciously held my breath, becoming even more tense. As expected, his magnetic, clear voice uttered two words, "So troublesome." I was indignantly about to get down and walk back to the room myself when I realized he had changed direction and was heading towards the dorm building. I couldn't hide my surprise. Suddenly, I felt that besides being a bit sharp-tongued, Gu Huai seemed to be quite good. My whole body felt sticky and uncomfortable. As soon as we reached the room, I quickly jumped off his back, grabbed some clothes, and ran into the bathroom. I only came out after I had thoroughly washed myself. Afraid that Gu Huai would complain about the smell of my dirty clothes, I immediately washed and hung them to dry. Unexpectedly, as I stepped back into the room from the balcony, I saw a terrifying sight. Gu Huai was sitting on a chair, holding the back of his own jacket up to him. It turned out that his jacket had somehow gotten a large wet patch from me, with a faint white stain. Gu Huai noticed my presence. He suddenly lifted his cold brown eyes and stared intently at me. I felt extremely guilty and secretly swallowed. Without waiting for him to say anything, I quickly snatched his jacket. "Sorry, my sweat stained your jacket. I'll wash it for you." I just wanted to destroy the evidence immediately. I started washing his jacket, not daring to think if Gu Huai had discovered anything. Gu Huai quickly took his clean clothes and went out to the balcony. I didn't turn around, but I could still feel his gaze on me. I was very nervous, my hands vigorously scrubbing his jacket. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him say nothing and head towards the bathroom. I subtly let out a sigh of relief. Unexpectedly, Gu Huai's voice suddenly rang out from behind me. "Are you a milk spirit? Is that why your sweat smells like milk?" I froze, not knowing how to answer. The sound of the door closing behind me felt like a great reprieve. In the subsequent days of military training, to prevent similar situations, I imitated Gu Huai and deliberately bought strong-smelling perfume, spraying it on myself. Although others complained that the perfume scent on me could be suffocating, at least it got me through. I never dared to see a doctor. After all, This matter was too difficult to talk about. I just had to spray perfume in time or deal with it properly whenever it was time for physical education or when the condition recurred. I considered myself always very careful, handling it perfectly. But strangely, every time I finished dealing with it and walked past Gu Huai, I noticed he would suddenly sniff, and then his cold eyes would fall on me, wondering what he was thinking. I was so scared that I tried to avoid him, even when in the dorm. But Gu Huai always coincidentally appeared around me. In class, as soon as I sat down, he would often walk in right after me and then sit directly behind me. Even without turning around, I could feel his gaze fixed on my stubborn nape. This made me extremely uncomfortable. Moreover, Gu Huai was too conspicuous. Every time he appeared, he attracted countless glances, making me feel countless eyes glancing my way as well. Honestly, I admired him a little. Didn't he feel uncomfortable with so much attention? I felt incredibly uncomfortable with just a few more glances from him. To escape this situation, I deliberately turned my head suddenly when Gu Huai wasn't paying attention to catch him in the act. I immediately ran into his clear, cold eyes. He seemed not to expect my sudden turn, but his expression only showed a slight flicker of fluctuation. Then he just looked directly at me openly and honestly. For some reason, his gaze made me feel a bit unable to bear it. The provocative words I'd planned to say, "What are you looking at?" "Looking at your daddy," were stuck in my throat. I turned my head away in frustration, wanting to punch myself. Why was I such a coward? I truly couldn't stand Gu Huai's scrutinizing gaze. Besides, using perfume to mask the smell wasn't a long-term solution. After all, if my clothes got wet, even a little bit, it would be very awkward. Plus, recently I've noticed that sometimes after I finish in the bathroom, Gu Huai will always go in to shower and stay for quite a long time. Every time, I'm terrified, afraid that I've left some trace for him to discover. So, I decided to be fully prepared and go to the hospital for a thorough checkup to escape this worry. Just as it was almost my turn, I suddenly heard the couple in front complaining. "The queue is too long, I wish I hadn't come. Online consultation would have been better." My eyes lit up. I returned to school and started an online consultation. The doctor said it was just a hormonal imbalance, very easy to treat, and prescribed quite a few medications. I took them for a week and found that after physical education, the condition almost never occurred. I was truly overjoyed and just wanted to share this good news with everyone. But as soon as I turned around, I saw Gu Huai looking at me. For some reason, I always felt his gaze was a little hard to read. I didn't pay much attention and happily went back to the dorm for a shower. As soon as I came out, I found that Gu Huai had also returned. I happily greeted him. He didn't bother to acknowledge me, walked straight into the bathroom, and closed the door. I happily washed my clothes. After a long time, I noticed there was no sound of water in the bathroom. As I wondered and turned my head, the bathroom door suddenly opened, and I happened to meet Gu Huai's indifferent gaze. For some reason, I instantly noticed that he seemed a little unhappy. It was rare to see him like this, and I couldn't help but ask him smugly, "There's no strange smell on me anymore, right?" Something flickered in Gu Huai's eyes, and he calmly replied, "Seems so. Why aren't you bathing with cow's milk anymore?" I quickly said the words I had prepared. "You misunderstood. Before, my mom made me drink milk instead of water to grow taller. My metabolism had some issues, so my sweat had a slight smell. Recently, I haven't been drinking it, and my metabolism is back to normal." I didn't know if it was my imagination, but I saw Gu Huai's eyebrow subtly raise, and he replied with one word. I secretly breathed a sigh of relief, feeling much more at ease. I secretly wondered why I hadn't known about online consultations sooner. I couldn't help but hum a tune while doing my homework. I didn't know if it was my imagination, but I always felt a gaze on the back of my neck. I turned around but only saw Gu Huai, one leg propped up, quietly reading on his bed. Was it just my imagination? I unconsciously reached up and rubbed the back of my neck, still wondering, when a tall, angry figure stormed in through the door. It was Chen Wenfeng from the next room, who was in the same class as us. He walked straight to Gu Huai. "Gu Huai, I heard you were the main forward for the basketball team in high school. Those brats from the next class challenged us to a game, and they even said they could beat our third-year class with just one finger. You definitely have to play. Gu Wai frowned. I already knew he was going to refuse. Before he could speak, Chen Wenfeng suddenly looked at me. You too, Songbai, I know you're a good shooter. You always refused before, but this time it's for honor. You can't refuse. Of course, I agreed. I really liked basketball and before, because of my condition, I didn't dare to participate in overly strenuous activities. I immediately nodded. At this moment, Gu Huai suddenly jumped lightly from the upper bunk and casually said, I'm going to change. I looked at him in surprise as he strode into the bathroom with his basketball uniform. His expression earlier clearly indicated he was going to refuse. Being able to play basketball without any worries was something I had never dreamed of. This made me incredibly excited and fully engaged throughout the game. I didn't notice that the girls, who mostly paid attention to Gu Huai, were also cheering for me nonstop. But in the second half, just as we were about to win, I had just shot a two-pointer when I suddenly felt a sharp pain in my chest, and something gushed out. I didn't need to look, I knew what had happened. I immediately instinctively bent down, conveniently using my arm to cover it, then pretended to have a stomachache, said to substitute someone else, and quickly left. As soon as I got back to the dorm, I immediately went into the bathroom and took off my shirt. Looking at the liquid constantly dripping, I hastily bit the hem of my shirt, fumbling to get tissues to wipe it. But wiping it repeatedly started to sting, and there was absolutely no sign of it stopping. Clearly, before, it would have stopped in a few minutes at most. I couldn't hide my panic. The more I wiped, the more it seemed to flow. I had a bad feeling. This situation didn't look good at all. The stinging pain made physiological tears well up in my eyes. I bit down hard on my shirt, but still couldn't hide the choked sob in my throat. I was completely panicked, using more and more force. Just as I didn't know what to do, the bathroom door suddenly opened. At the same time, Gu Huai's cold and irritated reprimand rang out. Songbai, we were about to win, and you suddenly left the court just to sneak back here to satisfy yourself? The moment I saw Gu Huai appear at the door, I suddenly looked up. My mind exploded, becoming empty, with only one thought remaining. I had forgotten to lock the door. I didn't know that at this moment, I was staring at him with watery eyes, blurry and helpless. When I regained my composure, I immediately looked at Gu Huai in horror, only to see him staring intently at me, his gaze growing deeper and deeper. I even felt his breathing seemed heavier. I couldn't help but tremble slightly, my face pale. I unconsciously raised my hand to cover myself, not wanting anyone to see my pathetic state. Gu Huai suddenly stepped in, casually locking the door. His shadow completely enveloped me. I looked up and saw him still staring at me without moving. The extreme feeling of humiliation made me wish I could die of shame. My whole body couldn't help but tremble. I didn't even dare to continue looking up at him, just lowered my head and in a voice almost choked with tears, helplessly pleaded, Please, don't look. Gu Huai's pupils constricted, his eyes bottomless. His beautiful but slightly hoarse voice resonated low. Are you scared? A pair of large, slender, strong hands gently rested on my shoulders. Don't be scared. Tell me what's wrong. It was clearly such an embarrassing and painful moment. But hearing Gu Huai's comforting words, I felt like I had finally grasped a lifeline. So anxious that tears were about to fall, I reached out my hand, quickly asking him as if for help. I don't know. The doctor clearly said it was just a hormonal imbalance, and it got better after taking the medicine, but now it suddenly won't stop. Am I going to die? Gu Huai looked at me, his eyes trembling slightly, his voice still gentle. No, you're just sick. Let me take a look. As he spoke, he gently pushed my hand away. My mind temporarily short-circuited. I didn't think of one thing. He wasn't a doctor. What good would looking do? Yet, I even cooperated with him, letting my hand down. I nervously watched Gu Huai. His expression didn't seem to change much. It was just that I didn't know if it was my imagination, but his breathing was somewhat heavier. After a long moment, he looked up at me and calmly said, I'll take you to the hospital. Hospital visit and a surprising recommendation. I was genuinely a little afraid of dying, so even though I was fine on the way to the hospital with Gu Wai driving, I didn't tell him to stop. Of course, it could also be because today's Gu Wai was no longer cold and aloof. He even personally took me to the hospital, which gave me an incredibly reliable feeling, making me, someone who was completely covered except for my eyes, not feel too ashamed about seeing a doctor. It was just that when registering for the consultation, Gu Wai seemed to be deliberating about something. First, he chose a male doctor, then regretted it and chose a female doctor, and finally, for some unknown reason, he frowned with a gloomy expression and chose a male doctor again. When I saw the doctor, I gathered all my courage and explained the entire situation. What made me sigh with relief was that the doctor's expression didn't change at all, as if my condition was just a very normal illness. After I completed the tests, the doctor also advised me to be careful with online consultations in the future, saying it was best to personally come to the hospital for checkups and especially not to take medication indiscriminately. Then he prescribed some medicine for me. Before leaving, he thought for a moment and then told me, "Young man, for this hormonal imbalance, it's best to find a girlfriend. It can basically be regulated." I was incredibly surprised. Having a girlfriend can also cure an illness? This is too miraculous. I nodded repeatedly. It was then that I noticed, for some reason, the ambient temperature suddenly dropped by several degrees. Turning around, I saw Gu Wai beside me radiating coldness, his eyes also coldly looking towards the doctor. I didn't understand why, so I quickly thanked the doctor and urged Gu Wai to go downstairs together to get the medicine. Just as we left the consultation room, Gu Wai suddenly stopped. "You go get the medicine first. I'll find you later." Gu Wai finished speaking, turned around, and went back to the doctor. I continued walking, wondering, faintly hearing Gu Wai seeming to ask, "What did you say about it only being a girlfriend?" Something like that. I was very curious what Gu Wai was asking. I considered eavesdropping, but then thought it wasn't very nice, so I didn't continue. A shift in our relationship. Ever since Gu Wai discovered my secret and personally accompanied me to the hospital, I felt that our relationship had long since become like close brothers. So, the next day when he calmly asked if I needed him to apply the medicine, I was deeply moved and refused. "Gu Wai, thank you. I can do it myself. I'm sorry for misunderstanding you before. Now I know, you're just cold on the outside but warm on the inside." Seeing this, Gu Wai didn't say anything more, but I knew he no longer considered me an outsider. Because he, who had never changed clothes in front of me before, hadn't avoided me these past few days. I remember that night he was drinking milk, and suddenly he accidentally spilled it on his shirt. I was wondering, didn't he hate the smell of milk? Why was he suddenly drinking milk? Then I saw him abruptly take off his shirt right in front of me to change. Seeing his strong, firm 8-pack abs, I was both admiring and even more touched that Gu Wai considered me family. In front of Gu Wai, I also felt much more at ease. Sometimes, when I accidentally overexerted myself and the condition recurred, I even asked Gu Wai to help me hide it a little. Gu Wai, each time, would not change his expression and very naturally take me back to the dorm. It was just that I gradually noticed that after I finished and came out, Gu Wai's dark brown eyes would always unintentionally glance at me. I felt a bit awkward, so I asked him directly what was wrong. He said naturally, "Didn't you take the medicine already?" I understood. He was asking why it still recurred even after taking the medicine. I sadly sighed. "It's much better, but occasionally it will recur if I exercise too strenuously." Alas, perhaps I really have to follow the doctor's advice and find a girlfriend to resolve it. As soon as I finished speaking, Gu Wai gave a cold "oh" in response. I didn't pay much attention, wondering in my heart if any girl would like me in my condition. They would probably just despise me, or even think I was a pervert. After much thought, I gave a self-deprecating laugh. I was really overthinking it. The engineering department was 90% boys. I barely even had a chance to meet girls. Where would I get a chance to have a girlfriend? I unconsciously searched for Gu Wai's figure in class. It was then I realized I hadn't talked to him much these past few days. After class, I went over and asked if he wanted to go to the cafeteria to eat together tonight. Chen Wenfeng smiled slyly, plopped down next to Gu Huai and slung his arm around his shoulder, saying, "Gu Huai, did you know? Tonight, our engineering department and the finance department are having a social event, and the finance department's campus bell specifically asked for you to attend. You lucky dog, your charm never runs out. Oh, I'm so jealous of your good looks. If I were as handsome as you, I could have a whole basketball team of girlfriends." I was both surprised and completely agreed with Chen Wenfeng. Being handsome really was great. Even though Gu Huai was cold and distant to everyone, acting as if no one caught his eye, there were still many girls confessing to him. Even the campus belle specifically wanted him. Not like me, because of my condition, I had never even held a girl's hand at this age. I couldn't hide my admiration as I looked at Gu Huai, only to see him glance at me and then refuse without hesitation. Chen Wenfeng groaned and begged him again. Those pretty girls from the finance department all said, "They'll only come if you go. Please, if you go, you'll be my dad, okay?" Gu Huai directly put on his Bluetooth headphones, unwilling to pay attention to him anymore. Chen Wenfeng almost choked with anger. He turned and saw me, his eyes lighting up. He immediately came over and put his hand on my shoulder. "Songbei, are you going to the social event with me tonight?" I couldn't hide my surprise. "Can I go too?" Chen Wenfeng naturally nodded. "Don't you know? Last time you played basketball, you were so cool. Many girls became your fans. You're handsome too. If you go, they'll definitely welcome you. So, come along." I had never known what a social event looked like at this age, so I immediately happily nodded. "Okay." As soon as the words left my mouth, a shadow enveloped me. I turned around to see Gu Huai pushing away Chen Wenfeng's hand from my shoulder and coldly asking for the address. Chen Wenfeng froze for a moment, then happily exclaimed, "You're coming too? Great. I'll send you the address right away." I also looked at Gu Huai in surprise, but Gu Huai didn't even glance at me from beginning to end. He sat back in his seat, picked up his phone, and chose music. I couldn't help but frown. Was it my imagination? Why did I feel that Gu Huai seemed quite cold towards me? The party and a revealing game. That evening, when Chen Wenfeng and I arrived, Gu Huai was already sitting in a corner, with a few other boys and girls present. Many girls secretly looked at Gu Huai while getting drinks or snacks. It was probably because Gu Huai exuded an stranger, don't come near aura that they didn't dare to sit directly next to him. Chen Wenfeng saw Gu Huai and immediately nudged my waist with his elbow, teasing, "This Gu Huai kid is so good at pretending. He acts like he's not interested in the finance department's campus bell, but he's the first one here. Looks like the pairing of Gu Huai and the finance department's campus bell is a done deal tonight." For some reason, hearing these words, my heart felt a little heavy. Perhaps I realized that the relationship between Gu Huai and me was not as close as I thought. Chen Wenfeng pulled me to sit opposite Gu Huai. After sitting down, I smiled and greeted him. "When did you get here?" Gu Huai glanced at me, didn't answer, and I couldn't help but feel a little awkward. Just then, a burst of cheers erupted. Before I could even look up, I smelled a fragrant perfume. Immediately after, a pretty girl in a short dress with long, straight black hair naturally sat down next to Gu Huai. She was Jiang Qing, the campus belle of the finance department. Many boys looked at Jiang Qing sitting directly next to Gu Huai with both envy and admiration. Jiang Qing also very naturally extended her fair hand to greet Gu Huai. "Gu Huai, hello, I'm Jiang Qing from the finance department. I don't know if you've heard of me." Gu Huai glanced at her outstretched hand and just nodded. Then he ignored her. Everyone present looked at Gu Huai in disbelief. The smile on Jiang Qing's face almost faltered. Fortunately, Chen Wenfeng knew how to liven up the atmosphere and quickly suggested playing an icebreaker game. We played a spinning bottle game. The person the bottle pointed to would have to choose between a dare or a truth. I was very nervous throughout the entire process because Chen Wenfeng played very hard. If the bottle pointed to someone and they chose truth, he would directly ask how many boyfriends or girlfriends they had, or how many people they had kissed. If it was my turn to answer and I said none, wouldn't I be laughed at? Those who chose dares had it even worse, either going to the next table to drink with handsome guys and beautiful girls or calling someone to confess their feelings. What made me sigh with relief was that after several rounds, it still wasn't my turn. Gu Huai also had pretty good luck and hadn't been hit yet. Just as I thought that, Who Knew the bottle slowly stopped, pointing directly at Gu Huai. I quickly covered my mouth, afraid he would realize it was because of my jinxing mouth. Chen Wenfeng saw Gu Huai get hit and immediately asked, "Truth or dare?" Gu Huai looked at the bottle and said coldly, "Truth." Chen Wenfeng seemed to have been waiting for this moment and unceremoniously asked, "Honestly answer, is there someone you like here?" Jiang Qing and the other girls present immediately looked at Gu Huai. The boys looked at Jiang Qing and then at Gu Huai, clearly also eagerly awaiting his answer. I couldn't help but look at him as well, and happened to see him glance at me too. For some reason, even my breathing lightened a bit. I saw Gu Huai's thin lips move slightly, and he calmly said one word, "Yes." As soon as Gu Huai answered, cheers erupted everywhere. Many boys playfully looked at Jiang Qing and Gu Huai. My movement of drinking water paused. Someone Gu Huai liked was here. Chen Wenfeng, with an expression of, "Let's see if this kid can keep pretending," smiled slyly and immediately pressed, quickly, "Who is it?" Everyone immediately fell silent, eagerly awaiting his answer. I looked at Gu Huai and then at Jiang Qing. The two of them sitting next to each other looked perfectly matched no matter how I saw it. For some reason, thinking of Gu Huai's gentle and comforting demeanor after discovering my secret, I secretly thought that if Gu Huai was so polite to me privately, he would definitely be even gentler with someone he liked. Thinking of this, I suddenly felt a little annoyed and didn't want to know who he liked. At this moment, Gu Huai gently said, "This is the second question." Everyone let out a disappointed sigh. Chen Wenfeng became even more hyped, rolled up his sleeves, and aggressively said, "Today, I'm definitely going to spin you guys." He grabbed the bottle and started spinning. Unfortunately, Gu Huai must have had a jamming device on him because the bottle never landed on him again in subsequent turns. On the other hand, I was quite unlucky, getting hit twice. Fortunately, the questions he asked were only along the lines of, "Do you like anyone here?" I directly shook my head. Everyone saw there was nothing interesting, so they quickly urged for the next round. I was sighing with relief when I looked up and saw Gu Huai looking at me with deep eyes. After looking directly at me, he naturally looked away. The spinning bottle game continued a few more times. Chen Wenfeng saw that it never landed on Gu Huai, so he suggested playing King's Game, where a person with a specific number is designated to do something. In the first round, the person holding the king card was the dealer, Chen Wenfeng. Everyone suspected he was cheating. He quickly said he wasn't, then designated numbers 3 and 5 to kiss. I looked at the number 3 card in my hand and then at the number 5 card in Jiang Qing's hand, completely shocked. Unexpectedly, Chen Wenfeng also gasped slightly, "Why is it you?" Realizing he had misspoken, he quickly forced a laugh. "This proves I'm not cheating, right? Since it's the first round, let's not play that big. Numbers 3 and 5 drink a bottle of Dao Boy beer." Jiang Qing breathed a sigh of relief. She picked up a bottle of beer and stood up, intending to clink bottles with me across the table. I was a bit awkward. My alcohol tolerance wasn't very good, only a few bottles. But a game is a game, so I had to pick up the beer bottle. As I was about to reach out to clink with Jiang Qing, Gu Huai suddenly stood up, took the beer bottle from Jiang Qing's hand, and said, "I'll drink for her." The atmosphere immediately erupted. Everyone's cheers were endless. This time, everyone could tell who Gu Huai said he liked here. Jiang Qing's beautiful face flushed slightly, and she couldn't help but crack a happy smile, then slowly sat down. I looked at Gu Huai's face, feeling more and more annoyed in my heart. I forced a smile and clinked bottles with Gu Huai. Amidst everyone's cheers, I chugged the entire bottle. An unexpected ending. After that, I was a bit unlucky, being designated to kiss or hug others several times in a row. I didn't really want to, so I had to drink alcohol instead. The more I drank, the dizzier I became. Everyone was talking animatedly, but I couldn't remember anything. I only felt someone suddenly carrying me away on their back. I seemed to smell a familiar cedar scent. This scent made me feel strangely at ease, and I don't know when I fell asleep. "Wake up, we're at the dorm." As I groggily woke up, I felt someone about to put me down from their back. I smelled the cold cedar scent again. I wasn't sure if it was my imagination, so I unconsciously leaned my head closer, intending to take a deep sniff to confirm. But I couldn't control my strength, bending my head down too forcefully. My head unfortunately hit his fair, beautiful nape. My lips also pressed against his nape. The person carrying me stiffened as if electrocuted for a moment, then continued to put me down on the chair. My mind,